Greetings, traveller. Here in the silence of this library, I uncover the most fascinating stories that have long been forgotten. Stay a while and listen, and I shall take you on a journey that has endured for centuries. Stories from Old World. Chapter 2. The Quest for Respect. The Talabec ran brown and quick with spring melt, hissing under driftwood and broken stakes as if it were whispering to itself about all the men who had fallen into it, and all the men still would. Fort Rauchstein woke to a brittle sun and the smell of boiled oats, and the Red Pike Company woke with it, groaning like doors that had forgotten how to open without complaint. They called him Tallow because names stick like burrs and come off like skin. He wore it like a dented breastplate, not fitting, not pretty, but better than bare. He trained when others smoked, drilled when others laughed, and breathed in the measured counts Priest Albrecht had taught him until the breath made a small square room in his chest where panic could not fit. Morning drill bit through the frost. Sergeant Ketson stalked the yard with a stave, correcting grips with a wrapped knuckle, stances with a boot heel, wrists straight, heels down. No, mouse, Tallow. Don't lead with your face unless you plan to kill them with your looks. The line chuckled. Tallow reset his hands on the halberd, planted his feet, cut and parried. The stave cracked his shoulder. Arms up. The beast won't kneel to accommodate your reach. Again and again. The pole bit the post. His shoulders burned. His breath stayed with him. That was something. Mathis would have teased him for it, had Mathis been a man who could tease again. At the edge of the yard, Marta Kappel watched with the indifference of a hawk that has already eaten. She spoke little, listened much, and wrote down things in her head that other people did not notice they had said. Father Albrecht stood beneath a cracked icon of Sigmar and tried to coax a smile out of parchment. He gave up and offered advice instead. Bread boy, he had told Tallow more than once. Feed men steady. Save meat for saints. After drill, the company broke to greasy bowls and thin beer. Tallow lingered near the fire, working the strap of his shield with his fingers until it sat just so on his arm. He could feel the scorched scrap against his ribs, as clearly as if it were a splinter. He had told himself a dozen times to give it to Albrecht for burning, and each time he had imagined the priest's eyes, sad and proud and disappointed all at once, and his hand had stayed in his cloak. Mattis's absence sat in the yard like a missing tooth. The tongue couldn't stop worrying. Men looked where he should have been, and then looked away as if not looking would fill the space. Ketson barked them into a patrol to keep them from thinking, and they went because that is what men do when the air has too much in it. The woods were a cathedral of shadows and ghosts. The rain had scoured the game trails down to slick bone, and their boots slid. A wind from the north carried a sweet rot that made men restless. They found nothing with horns and too many teeth, and nothing found them, which should have been comfort, and wasn't. Back inside the palisade, Tallow practiced in the yard until his hands shook. The stave wrapped his forearm. "Stop when your form goes," Ketson said. "There's no honor in teaching your muscles the wrong story." Tallow nodded, shelved the halberd, and took his breath for a walk where the palisade didn't see. He found the circle of old stones under the pines again, and the shallow bowl that pretended it had never been a bowl. The raven was not there. The silence was. He set Albrecht's litany on the stone. He set the scorched scrap beside it. He breathed. Something answered. It was not a voice. Voices are the property of mouths and lungs, and the air between. This was a pressure on a bruise he did not know he had, a throb in the seam where his wanting met the world's indifference, a distant cadence that found the beat in his blood and tapped it like a drum under the floorboards. He drew his hand back. The feeling followed, clinging, thin as spider silk. Bread, he told himself, and his mouth had no bread in it, so he took out a heel of yesterday's and ate it to make the word true. Crumbs stuck in his teeth. He counted them and then laughed at himself, because counting crumbs is not a virtue. It is a sickness of worry. He put his palm flat on the scorched scrap. Warmth pooled under the skin. The beat grew nearer. He smelled hot iron like a smithy waking, and the metallic edge of blood, memory or prophecy he could not tell. His heart picked up the cadence and ran with it until his breath had to catch up, or he would fall. He snatched his hand away. The warmth lingered. The drum retreated, still there. Not yet, he whispered to the trees, to himself. Not like this. He took the little cord from his wrist, the prayer tally Albrecht had given him long ago, and notched it with his knife. Not a prayer, exactly. Not a thanks. A mark of contact. A debt he refused to name. The debt travelled with him back to camp, like a weight he told himself was not heavy. That night, the beastmen came at last with more than prodding sticks. Ungors poured out of the dark like rotten apples shaken loose. Two gors led, trampling the ditch. The Red Pike lifted steel and met them in a snarl of splinters and screams. Tallow set his shield and did the work he knew. He breathed. He put his fingers to Otto's wrist and steadied the bird in the jug. He held a gap while a man fumbled a quarrel string and did not die. It was enough to call usefulness, and not enough to call respect. A brute howled at the north wall and then fell silent. The assault slushed away. The men laughed too loud and slapped each other too hard and made almost jokes about men they had known who would not know anything again. Albrecht spoke the names. Marta Kappel took note of who had prayed and who had cursed, and who had done both at once. The Talabec ran fat and fast, dragging branches and secrets toward the sea. Raukstein's yard steamed with morning breath and boiled oats. Men grumbled, stretched, shouldered pikes. The Red Pike Company drilled because habit keeps fear from learning new tricks. They still called him Tallow, though now it sounded less like a joke and more like a reminder. He trained until the stave stopped kissing his wrists. Ketson prowled with a predator's patience, rapping knuckles, hooking boots. Wrists straight, hips under. Hold your ground like you own a piece of it, he barked. And when he reached Tallow, the stave tapped once, lighter than last week. Near the brazier, Otto watched with a half grin. Feather breath, he corrected himself, catching Tallow's stare. Help later? Tallow nodded. Breath is bread. We'll take slices. But the bread was thin. On duty, his boons steadied hands and slowed breaths. A crossbow bolt flew truer. A pikeman's parry came on time. It saved fingers, sometimes a life, but it never turned the fight. The men took it as luck, or shrugged it off. Your whispers butter no knives. A veteran snorted after a dull skirmish, that left 2 limping and a third swearing at a broken tooth. If I cut, it's because I cut. Tallow swallowed pride like gristle. 7 in hold, 7 out. Always 7. Albrecht clapped his shoulder. Bread, the priest murmured. It keeps men alive to want more. That night, the wind went hard from the north. A patrol returned with 2 wounded and talk of horns at dusk, and a shadow that moved against the trees. As dusk fell, the Red Pike formed to chase a raiding line brushing the hamlets upriver. They found the raiders at a split in the pines. Ungors gnawing raw turnips, 2 Gors arguing over a ragged banner. The first exchange was fast and stupid. Bolts, screams, steel, mud. Tallow pressed his fingers to Otto's wrist and counted. Steady. 7 in, hold, 7 out. And Otto's quarrel took an Ungor in the throat. Luck, the scar-lipped veteran muttered, wiping his blade on a dead thing's hide. Always luck. The words stuck under Tallow's ribs. After, Tallow went back to the circle of old stones. He had not eaten. He had not slept. The scrape of drum against blood came quicker now, as if it had learned his path and decided to meet him halfway. No one had asked him to do this. He cut his palm with his knife because someone had to ask something of someone for anything to answer. Blood stung the air, and he had to swallow fast to keep from tasting it. A sound came into the circle like iron on iron far away, and the air warmed enough to make his breath steam less. He set the litany down. He put the scorched scrap over it like a blot. "I want to be enough," he said again, because he had said it once, and a promise repeated is a promise that thinks it is law. The pressure under his skin shifted. It was not agreement, it was attention. He had asked a god for bread and turned to a butcher to beg for crumbs. He took a bone from his pouch, a finger bone, light and polite. He placed it at the north of the circle, and then did the same with another at the east, the south, the west. His breath paced him. The beat under it answered. He did not know what he was doing, and he did. He whispered a benediction Albrecht had taught him and let it sour at the edges. Let the words turn in his mouth until they were harder. Somewhere at the edges of the world, a drum smiled with its teeth. He put his bleeding palm on the scorched scrap and did not pull away when the heat bloomed up his arm. He felt a hunger that was not his, and was. He felt his name float like a leaf on a river, and then catch on a stone and stay. When he lifted his hand, the scrap was tacky with his blood, and the circle smelled like rain on old iron. He bound his hand with clean cloth, and then unbound it, and bound it again, until the binding felt like a choice. He breathed in, reflex ready to count. 7, hold. 7, 8. He blinked. The number slid greasily under his thought and hid. No, 7. Always 7. The next day began wet and ended worse. The Red Pike went to escort powder wagons to the Weeping Oaks. Beastmen chose the narrowest cut of road for their ambush. Ditches deep, hedge high, sightlines cruel. The first horn brayed that queasy half tone that makes a stomach jump. Arrows hissed. The lead wagon's wheel exploded into splinters. "Brace!" Ketson roared. Ungors poured over the hedge. Gors behind, foam flecking their jaws. Crossbows thrummed. Men screamed. A teamster went down under hooves. Powder kegs rolled and bumped like fat toddlers toward a ditch. Tallow moved to bless Otto. 7 in. and the hedge burst beside him. A gauze cleaver came for his skull, and he got the shield up just in time. The impact drove him to his heel, rattled his teeth. The cleaver stuck in the rim. The gore bellowed and ripped. The shield tore free with a shower of splinters. The line bent. He didn't think. He reached. Palm to leather, bandage slick with last night's blood. He pulled. Not the careful thread he knew. He tore a handful. Heat surged up his arm and into his chest, and the world burned red around the edges. The drum behind his ribs stopped being far away. Two men near him changed in an instant. The scar-lipped veteran, Gert, took a blow on his pike like a mast taking wind, then drove the blade clean through a charging gore, iron head and ash shaft punching out the creature's back in a spray. The force flung two Ungors off their feet behind it, as if a giant had cuffed them. Otto, stumbling, threw a javelin as if it were a broom. The shaft shrieked in the air and took an Ungor's head clean off. The head skipped like a tossed stone and thumped to a stop, eyes bewildered. "Sigmar save," Otto gasped, staring at his hand as if it belonged to a larger man. Another gore cleaved down at Tallow and met his short sword. The clash should have been a bind. It wasn't. The force travelled through Tallow into the gore. Bone snapped with a gunshot crack, and the beast's arm tore away at the elbow, flying up in a slow arc to slap wetly against a wagon side. The gore coughed out his last surprise with a sound like a hinge. The wedge of red pike around Tallow moved as if one mind had found them. For 30 heartbeats, they became a machine, breathless, tireless, horrifying. Pike heads punched through rib cages as if through reeds. Shield corners shattered teeth. A man with a cut to the bone in his thigh lurched up roaring and sprinted forward as if his blood were wine, hammering an Ungor flat with his buckler. "Push!" Ketzen's voice rode their momentum like a rider on a great horse. "Push! Now!" They slammed the herd against the ditch. Hooves fumbled, bodies tumbled backward, limbs tangling, screams turning to shrieks. A powder keg bumped, spun, and dropped. Tallow grabbed Gert's collar and hauled him back as the keg struck stones, and didn't crack by the grace of all practical gods. Beastmen fled. The few who tried to hold were crushed. The Red Pike stood panting in the wreckage of a bad plan, made good by worse power. And then the heat left. Tallow staggered and grabbed the wagon's side. Black veins crawled up his wrists and spidered toward his elbows, stark as ink in snow. A sound like a drumhead splitting cracked the world inside his ear. He flinched and realized no one else had heard it. Blood tickled his upper lip. He wiped it with the back of his hand and stared dumbly at the red smear. "Mouse," Keatson said, not unkind, not kind. He took in the veins, the nosebleed, the shaking. "Stand." Tallow stood. The world swam and steadied. The men were looking at him now, really looking, not as a joke, as the hinge on which the door had refused to swing. What was that?" Otto asked, breathless, grinning and frightened both. "I felt like I could pull down a tree." "Breath," Tallow said. It came out hoarse, false, and everyone knew it. He found the breath all the same. 7 in, hold. 7, 8, a flicker of trespass. His stomach clenched. No, 7. always 7. They hauled the powder on raw ropes and stubbornness to the battery. The cannon crews cheered the way starving men stepped back from a cliff. Albrecht washed blood from a boy's eyes and said a prayer with a gentleness that made Tallow want to be kinder to himself. Marta Kappel watched Tallow's hands wrap and re-wrap his bandage and said nothing. Her ledger eyes wrote. After the wagons were stowed and the dead counted and the living badly praised, Tallow slipped away. He did not have the luxury of sleep. The stream in the pines bit him to the hip. He sat until his skin went numb. He pressed his palm to cold rock and felt the heat in his bones argue with it. He breathed. 7 in, hold, 7 out. He forced the count back into its old grooves like a wheel onto a rutted road. The drum receded by inches. The black veins on his forearms faded to smoke shadows, then to faint bruising, then to pale, like a sin turning rumour. The nosebleed stopped. The ringing in his ears lessened from a hammer to a spoon. He took the wire brush from his kit and dragged it over his shoulders and ribs until the pain pulled his mind out of the drum's rhythm and into his skin. He muttered Albrecht's bread prayers like arithmetic he wanted to believe in. He scooped ash from the firebed and smeared a line over each forearm, then washed it away and did it again. A binding he made up and promised to obey. 1 notch back, he tied the leather cord tighter. The cut marks crowded. He added a small new slash between 2 larger ones and told himself it meant recovered. Back at camp, the yard noticed. Men gave him space not out of disdain now, but the other thing. Respect is a creature that stalks in slowly, sniffing. If you face it, it skitters. If you look away, it noses your hand. Gert clapped his shoulder, hard, the way men hide tenderness. Didn't know you had that in you, Mouse. Me neither, Tallow said, which was truer than he liked. Otto hovered. Can you do it again? When I must, Tallow said. He tried to smile. It came out like a grimace that had lost its way. They marched the next day to clear the timberline. Tallow kept his taps shallow, 1 and 1, never 2 in the same breath. The wedge moved clean through a knot of goreband without losing a man, when a broad, pale boar thing burst from a mushroom hummock with too many eyes and a mouth wrong for chewing. Tallow spared a deep pull. Gert's pike took the beast in the chest and drove it squealing through a sapling. The shockwave knocked 3 ungals into a heap like dropped kindling. 30 heartbeats. Then the heat sank, and Tallow clenched his jaw until he could feel his teeth again. Ketson watched him as men watch new engines, measuring heat, noise, the smell of failure. Know when to stop, he said after, like advice about beer. I do, Tallow lied to both of them. Each night, the purging ritual. Cold immersion until lips went blue. Breath in a coffin cadence until the drum muttered and went sulk in a corner. Flagellant lashwork until the pain came back under his ownership. Ash markings. Albrecht's hymns, murmured, then spat, then murmured again. Each time, the veins receded, the whispers dimmed. The heat went from forge to heart hearth, 2 notches back, sometimes 3 if he pushed. Never enough to erase the debt. Enough to make the numbers behave for 1 more day. Eat, Albrecht ordered more than once, setting bread and stew in Tallow's hands like absolution. Bread is not optional. Bread is always optional, Tallow muttered once, teeth chattering after the stream. Albrecht only looked at him until Tallow lifted the spoon. Marta Kappel cornered him once in the yard's lee. "See any odd dreams?" she asked, tone conversational, eyes flint. "I see men I couldn't help," he said. "That is the most honest answer I've heard this month." "What would you have me say?" "That you will keep your prayers small." "I will keep them as small as they need to be," he said, which is another way of saying not small at all. She tilted her head. "You have the look of a man who has decided to become a better liar." She stepped away, then paused. "If your count changes, notice it." He opened his mouth to say something clever. He closed it. He had noticed. Toward week's end, command tested them. A night raid on a marauder camp, rain hard as thrown seed. Tallow metered the taps like a careful gambler. One for the breach, one for the push, one for the rout. In the tight press of tents and screams, a man with a slit throat clutched his neck and stumbled upright, roaring, swinging a cudgel one-handed to clear space for a medic. A halberdier wrenched his polearm from 3 bodies at once. A crossbow bolt went through 2 men and pinned a third to a pillar. "Red Pike!" someone screamed, not as a name but a prayer. They were unstoppable for that pocket of time. Then they were only men again, panting, shaky, exultant, ashamed of how good it felt. After, Tallow staggered to the stream and sat until his body forgot its name. The veins lightened, the ringing faded. The number in his head tried to go to 8. He caught it. No, 7. 7 in, hold, 7 out. Why 8? Because blood has 8 points, a whisper suggested with a smile full of knives. He ground his molars until his jaw ached and went back to 7. Always 7. At mess, rough hands thumped his back. Gert made an obscene joke about Tallow's shield arm. Otto started telling a story that made Tallow sound larger and faster and braver than he had been, and for once, no one interrupted. Even Ketson's mouth twitched. Respect arrived in cups, half full, and he sipped and didn't look to see who watched. The story has come to an end. Our hearth still burns. Stay, warm yourself, and let sleep take you as the world drifts into silence.